One. There we go. Good evening, everybody. It's very good to be here. Thanks for coming, Caio, João, Susan, Yuri, Guilherme, e Erika. All right, it's a short class tonight. Very few students around here. I don't know what's going on, but maybe people are going home. People are at the transportation, on the bus, and they must be coming soon. Hopefully, will be. Aimee chegou também. Boa noite, Aimee. Tudo bem? All right. So let's start. Let me check here the chat. Caio has shared with us this Senado link talking about organ donations. Projeto de lei sobre doação de órgãos. Muito interessante a discussão, viu, gente? O João está comentando aqui, eu estive pensando se essa política de doação de alguma forma poderia fortalecer o tráfico de órgãos. Eu acho que é o contrário, né? Ela poderia enfraquecer o tráfico de órgãos, né? Porque se há uma abundância de órgãos sendo doados, tem um prêmio menor para aquelas pessoas que praticam esse crime, né? Que hoje em dia é crime. Você doar um órgão de forma irregular, fora do sistema público. Isso daí, hoje em dia, é considerado crime. São casos muito raros de pessoas que são sequestradas para remoção de órgãos, mas isso também já houve casos desse tipo. Mas eu tenho a impressão, viu, João, que é o oposto. Se a gente tiver um caminho legal, respeitável e principalmente tiver abundância de doadores, né? Aí a lucratividade do esquema ilegal fica menor. But anyway, good point. Felipe, you are here. Elidio, Hayane, thanks for coming, guys. We are just about to start. So before I do start, let me ask you if you have a question, a comment, maybe some suggestions. We are like at the end of our class, right? We have like 3, maybe 4 topics to discuss. And it's been a good journey so far. We have discussed lots and lots of interesting issues. A gente deve estar faltando aí mais 3 tópicos diferentes, eu acho, só para a gente acabar. Tonight we're going to be talking about ageism, which means a specific sort of prejudice and discrimination against older people. Então, hoje a gente vai falar sobre um tipo específico de preconceito. A gente já falou bastante sobre preconceito e discriminação, mas hoje a gente vai falar sobre o preconceito e a discriminação contra as pessoas idosas. E esse é um problema global. Why is that so? Why is this the global issue? Well, basically because the whole world population is getting older. It's not only in Brazil, all over the world, we have more and more people living to be 70s, 80, maybe even 90 years old. So we're having like a larger share of the population in later stages of life. And that is good. It means we are living longer. That's good news. But that also brings us some concerns, ok? Esse fato da gente ter uma população mais velha, é óbvio que a gente comemora, né, que as pessoas estão vivendo mais, mas isso também traz algumas preocupações, entre elas, preocupações relativas ao preconceito contra pessoas mais velhas. All right. But by the end of last class, we were still talking about mind space, right? And then I posted a video for you guys wrapping up that discussion. Do you guys have any questions about mind space? By the way, mind space is a very, very interesting topic. Remember, just to remind you a little bit, With MindSpace, we were talking about a checklist on how to develop behavioral interventions, right? Então, é uma checklist de como que a gente desenvolve intervenções comportamentais de modo a tentar ajudar as pessoas a fazerem melhores escolhas. The name MindSpace, each of the letters in this expression means something, right? So M stands for messenger, I stands for incentives, N stands for norms, which means social norms, né? Normas sociais, tabus, crenças coletivas. S stands for salience, which means trying to bring out the details of something, highlight important aspects of some decision. Then you have P for priming, and that's kind of, controversial element of behavioral interventions. You guys understand what priming is? A palavra é essa aqui, ó, gente. Priming. P-R-I-M-I-N-G. Priming. Well, priming is when you kind of expose someone to an idea, but in a very subtle way. One that sometimes is almost unconscious, right? Então é quase como se fosse uma dica subliminar. Because of that, myself, I don't like that. I like behavior interventions in which people know exactly what you're doing, why you're doing. So I prefer to be absolutely transparent and clear about which means I'm using, which ends I'm trying to achieve. Okay. So, but anyway, sometimes you use priming. Let's talk about an example. All right. So, suppose you want to promote organ donation. Okay. Suponha que você quer promover doação de órgãos. Now, depending on how you're going to announce that, let's suppose you have like a, I don't know, some sort of publicity material, some sort of propaganda, commercial on TV or something like that. Now, how you do that? Well, sometimes you will just use like a very smooth music, something that resembles love, caring for each other. You use soft colors, like light colors. You try to remind people of their responsibility with each other, with their kids, with their parents. So by using colors and songs and music, you may try to appeal for people's sensibility. So you say, oh, come on, but this is like kind of manipulative, maybe. And I say, yeah, well, a little bit, but not too hard, right? So you are not fooling anyone. You're just like using some kind of emotional elements to help people realize how important that is. So that can be considered priming if you use music in a commercial to promote organ donation. How bad is that? Well, in my opinion, it may not be that bad, but we have to be careful, okay? The more subtle we are, the more likely we are also to be considered manipulative, okay? So sometimes you have to be very clear about the means you're using and what are your goals, okay? So mind space, P, then letter A. A stands for affect, which means emotions in general. Yeah, they may help people, I don't know, pay more attention to some important issues. And mind space, CE. C stands for commitment. So you try to create commitment devices. You try to create kind of an agreement with people so that they feel like they are part of a pact, and then they have responsibilities with each other, right? And the last one is E for ego. Yeah, people, vanity is just part of human brain, it's part of a human mind. And sometimes ego can be used in a non-coercive way. And I always remember that one with the power bills in the UK, right? You guys remember that example? Você se lembra daquele exemplo da conta de luz na União, na, no Reino Unido? No Reino Unido, a gente tinha lá contas de luz para promover as pessoas a gastarem menos energia, e a maneira de fazer era apelar para o ego delas. Elas falavam assim: você está gastando um pouco menos do que os seus vizinhos, em média. E a pessoa ficava toda orgulhosa, estimulada a gastar menos. On the other hand, if your bill was too high, if you were using up too much energy, then you would get a bill saying, in red letters, saying, yo, you are spending way more than the average of your neighbors. And then you feel like, wow, how come? I don't accept that. I mean, what am I, stupid? I'm using up more energy than anyone else. Maybe I should somehow save my money, save energy, or something like this. So it's ego that is driving people sometimes, right? When you compare them to their neighbors, they will feel like, yeah, I can do better than that. And that is non-coercive. It will not cause you any harm. It's just a piece of information that was specifically chosen for you in order to, I don't know, help you make better choices. Any questions about mind space then? Okay? Okay. All right then. Am I speaking too fast tonight? I don't know. Maybe sometimes I feel like I drink too much coffee during the day and I'm kind of overexcited. I don't know if that's the case tonight. Eu tô falando um pouco rápido demais, gente, ou tá normal? Thanks, Susan. Yeah, not too bad. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at our class notes. By the way, they are already available in your Google Classroom. If you go back there and check. Oh, yeah, you have to go back there and check because there is this list of exercises which is due tonight. Please, please, guys, don't forget to submit your answers by the end of the night tonight, okay? By tomorrow morning, I'm gonna block new answers, new submissions. But please do and participate, otherwise your grade may be a little bit lower. Okay, now, finally, let's start with this new set of class notes. Okay, then. Now, we are talking about a new global challenge, or one more global challenge, not so new, actually, but one more global challenge, which is aging. Aging is the process of having an older population on average, a larger share of the population with ages above 60 years old or something like that, okay? So that can bring both challenges and opportunities. And that, I'm just trying to get rid of these mosquitoes here. I don't want to get dengue. All right, sorry. So let's start taking a look at these videos. We have one that is about how societies can grow old better. And the other one is about how grandmothers can actually exercise a very important social role in our societies. Let's start with Jared Diamond, the first one here. This TED Talk from 2013. What do you say? Sounds good? Okay, so let me stop this presentation here for a second, and I will get the video for us. How societies can grow older. How societies can grow older better. There we go. Okay. So let's listen to this video. Let's watch and listen to this video together. And afterwards, I will come up and we will discuss a little bit, see what you guys could take from it, okay? All right. Let me prepare this thing here. Okay. Okay, we got. Can you guys hear? Só para saber se o som tá chegando bem, gente. Tá dando para ouvir?
Tá sim, direitinho.
Valeu, obrigado.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, it's okay.
Thanks, guys. Here we go.
To give me an idea how many of you here may find what I'm about to tell you of practical value, let me ask you please to raise your hands. Who here is either over 65 years old or hopes to live past age 65 or has parents or grandparents who did live or have lived past 65? Raise your hands, please. Okay, you are the people to whom my talk will be of practical value. The rest of you won't find my talk personally relevant, but I think that you'll still find this subject fascinating. I'm going to talk about growing older in traditional societies. This subject constitutes just one chapter of my latest book, which compares traditional, small, tribal societies with our large, modern societies with respect to many topics such as bringing up children, growing older, health, dealing with danger, settling disputes, religion, and speaking more than one language. Those tribal societies, which constituted all human societies for most of human history, are far more diverse than are our modern, recent big societies. All big societies that have governments and where most people are strangers to each other are inevitably similar to each other and different from tribal societies. Tribes constitute thousands of natural experiments in how to run a human society. They constitute experiments from which we ourselves may be able to learn. Tribal societies shouldn't be scorned as primitive and miserable, but also they shouldn't be romanticized as happy and peaceful. When we learn of tribal practices, some of them will horrify us, but there are other tribal practices which, when we hear about them, we may admire and envy and wonder whether we could adopt those practices ourselves. Most old people in the US end up living separately from their children and from most of their friends of their earlier years. And often they live in separate retirement homes for the elderly. Whereas in traditional societies, older people instead live out their lives among their children, their other relatives, and their lifelong friends. Nevertheless, the treatment of the elderly varies enormously among traditional societies, from much worse to much better than in our modern societies. At the worst extreme, many traditional societies get rid of their elderly in one of four increasingly direct ways: by neglecting their elderly and not feeding or cleaning them until they die, or by abandoning them when the group moves, or by encouraging older people to commit suicide, or by killing older people. In which tribal societies do children abandon or kill their parents? It happens mainly under two conditions. One is in nomadic hunter-gatherer societies that often shift camp and that are physically incapable of transporting old people who can't walk, when the able-bodied younger people already have to carry their young children and all their physical possessions. The other condition is in societies living in marginal or fluctuating environments, such as the Arctic or deserts, where there are periodic food shortages, and occasionally there just isn't enough food to keep everyone alive. Whatever food is available has to be reserved for able-bodied adults and for children. To us Americans, it sounds horrible to think of abandoning or killing your own sick wife or husband or elderly mother or father. But what could those traditional societies do differently? They face a cruel situation of no choice. Their old people had to do it to their own parents, and the old people know what now is going to happen to them. At the opposite extreme, in treatment of the elderly, the happy extreme, are the New Guinea farming societies where I've been doing my field work for the past 50 years, and most other sedentary traditional societies around the world. In those societies, older people are cared for, they are fed, they remain valuable, and they continue to live in the same hut or else in a nearby hut near their children, relatives, and lifelong friends. There are two main sets of reasons for this variation among societies in their treatment of old people. The variation depends especially on the usefulness of old people and on the society's values. First, as regards usefulness, older people continue to perform useful services. One use of older people in traditional societies is that they often are still effective at producing food. Another traditional usefulness of older people is that they are capable of babysitting their grandchildren, thereby freeing up their own adult children, the parents of those grandchildren, to go hunting and gathering food for the grandchildren. Still another traditional value of older people is in making tools, weapons, baskets, pots, and textiles. In fact, they're usually the people who are best at it. Older people usually are the leaders of traditional societies and the people most knowledgeable about politics, medicine, religion, songs, and dances. Finally, older people in traditional societies have a huge significance that would never occur to us in our modern literate societies, where our sources of information are books and the internet. In contrast, in traditional societies without writing, older people are the repositories of information. It's their knowledge that spells the difference between survival and death for their whole society in a time of crisis caused by rare events of which only the oldest people alive have had experience. Those, then, are the ways in which older people are useful in traditional societies. Their usefulness varies and contributes to variation in the society's treatment of the elderly. The other set of reasons for variation in treatment of the elderly is the society's cultural values. For example, there's particular emphasis on respect for the elderly in East Asia, associated with Confucius's doctrine of filial piety, which means obedience, respect, and support for elderly parents. Cultural values that emphasize respect for older people contrast with the low status of the elderly in the US. Older Americans are at a big disadvantage in job applications. They're at a big disadvantage in hospitals. Our hospitals have an explicit policy called age-based allocation of healthcare resources. That sinister expression means that if hospital resources are limited, for example, if only one donor heart becomes available for transplant, or if a surgeon has time to operate on only a certain number of patients, American hospitals have an explicit policy of giving preference to younger patients over older patients on the grounds that younger patients are considered more valuable to society because they have more years of life ahead of them, even though the younger patients have fewer years of valuable life experience behind them. There are several reasons for this low status of the elderly in the US. One is our Protestant work ethic, which places high value on work, so older people who are no longer working aren't respected. Another reason is our American emphasis on the virtues of self-reliance and independence, so we instinctively look down on older people who are no longer self-reliant and independent. Still, a third reason is our American cult of youth which shows up even in our advertisements. Ads for Coca-Cola and beer always depict smiling young people, even though old as well as young people buy and drink Coca-Cola and beer. Just think, what's the last time you saw a Coke or beer ad depicting smiling people 85 years old? Never. Instead, the only American ads featuring white-haired old people are ads for retirement homes and pension planning. Well, what has changed in the status of the elderly today compared to their status in traditional societies? There have been a few changes for the better and more changes for the worse. Big changes for the better include the facts that today we enjoy much longer lives, much better health in our old age, and much better recreational opportunities. Another change for the better is that we now have specialized retirement facilities and programs to take care of old people. Changes for the worse begin with the cruel reality that we now have more old people and fewer young people than at any time in the past. That means that all those old people are more of a burden on the few young people, and that each old person has less individual value. Another big change for the worse in the status of the elderly is the breaking of social ties with age, because older people, their children and their friends, all move and scatter independently of each other many times during their lives. We Americans move on the average every 5 years. Hence, our older people are likely to end up living distant from their children and the friends of their youth. Yet another change for the worse in the status of the elderly is formal retirement from the workforce, carrying with it a loss of work friendships and a loss of the self-esteem associated with work. Perhaps the biggest change for the worse is that our elderly are objectively less useful than in traditional societies. Widespread literacy means that they are no longer useful as repositories of knowledge. When we want some information, we look it up in a book or we Google it, instead of finding some old person to ask. The slow pace of technological change in traditional societies means that what someone learns there as a child is still useful when that person is old, but the rapid pace of technological change today means that what we learn as children is no longer useful 60 years later. And conversely, we older people are not fluent in the technologies essential for surviving in modern society. For example, as a 15-year-old, I was considered outstandingly good at multiplying numbers because I had memorized the multiplication tables, and I know how to use logarithms, and I'm quick at manipulating a slide rule. Today, though, those skills are utterly useless because any idiot can now multiply 8-digit numbers accurately and instantly with a pocket calculator. Conversely, I, at age 75, am incompetent at skills essential for everyday life. My family's first TV set in 1948 had only 3 knobs that I quickly mastered: an on-off switch, a volume knob, and a channel selector knob. Today, just to watch a program on the TV set in my own house, I have to operate a 41-button TV remote that utterly defeats me. I have to telephone my 25-year-old sons and ask them to talk me through it while I try to push those wretched 41 buttons. What can we do to improve the lives of the elderly in the U.S. and to make better use of their value? That's a huge problem. In my remaining 4 minutes today, I can offer just a few suggestions. One value of older people is that they are increasingly useful as grandparents for offering high-quality child care to their grandchildren if they choose to do it, as more young women enter the workforce and as fewer young parents of either gender stay home as full-time caretakers of their children. Compared to the usual alternatives of paid babysitters and daycare centers, grandparents offer superior, motivated, experienced child care. They've already gained experience from raising their own children. They usually love their grandchildren and are eager to spend time with them. Unlike other caregivers, grandparents don't quit their job because they found another job with higher pay looking after another baby. A second value of older people is paradoxically related to their loss of value as a result of changing world conditions and technology. At the same time, older people have gained in value today precisely because of their unique experience of living conditions that have now become rare because of rapid change, but that could come back. For example, only Americans now in their 70s or older today can remember the experience of living through a Great Depression, the experience of living through a world war, and agonizing whether or not dropping atomic bombs would be more horrible than the likely consequences of not dropping atomic bombs. Most of our current voters and politicians have no personal experience of any of those things, but millions of older Americans do. Unfortunately, all of those terrible situations could come back. Even if they don't come back, we have to be able to plan for them on the basis of the experience of what they were like. Older people have that experience, younger people don't. The remaining value of older people that I'll mention involves recognizing that while there are many things that older people can no longer do, there are other things that they can do better than younger people. A challenge for society is to make use of those things that older people are better at doing. Some abilities, of course, decrease with age. Those include abilities at tasks requiring physical strength and stamina, ambition, and the power of novel reasoning in a circumscribed situation, such as figuring out the structure of DNA best left to scientists under the age of 30. Conversely, valuable attributes that increase with age include experience, understanding of people and human relationships, ability to help other people without your own ego getting in the way, and interdisciplinary thinking about large databases, such as economics and comparative history, best left to scholars over the age of 60. Hence, older people are much better than younger people at supervising, administering, advising, strategizing, teaching, synthesizing, and devising long-term plans. I've seen this value of older people with so many of my friends in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s who are still active as investment managers, farmers, lawyers, and doctors. In short, many traditional societies make better use of their elderly and give their elderly more satisfying lives than we do in modern big societies. Paradoxically, nowadays, when we have more elderly people than ever before, living healthier lives and with better medical care than ever before, old age is in some respects more miserable than ever before. The lives of the elderly are widely recognized as constituting a disaster area of modern American society. We can surely do better by learning from the lives of the elderly in traditional societies. But what's true of the lives of the elderly in traditional societies is true of many other features of traditional societies as well. Of course, I'm not advocating that we all give up agriculture and metal tools and return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. There are many obvious respects in which our lives today are far happier than those in small traditional societies. To mention just a few examples, our lives are longer, materially much richer, and less plagued by violence than are the lives of people in traditional societies. But there are also things to be admired about people in traditional societies and perhaps to be learned from them. Their lives are usually socially much richer than our lives, although materially poorer. Their children are more self-confident, more independent, and more socially skilled than are our children. They think more realistically about dangers than we do. They almost never die of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and the other non-communicable diseases that will be the causes of death of almost all of us in this room today. Features of the modern lifestyle predispose us to those diseases, and features of the traditional lifestyle protect us against them. Those are just some examples of what we can learn from traditional societies. I hope that you'll find it as fascinating to read about traditional societies as I found it to live in those societies. Thank you.
All right, let me stop this presentation here and let me see what you guys got from it. All right, who would like to start? Who would like to start? que vocês acharam, pessoal? É interessante? O que você gostou, João? Diga lá, comenta para mim. Ó, o Vinícius chegou aí também. Tudo bom, Vinícius?
Tudo bom, professor?
Tudo legal. Chegou a assistir o vídeo inteiro ou pegou só um pedacinho?
Professor, eu vi, meu inglês não é muito bom, então eu tenho um pouco de dificuldade.
Tá, tudo bem, legal, obrigado pela honestidade, é isso mesmo. Então, gente, ó, o João está comentando aqui, aparentemente ele começa avaliando o valor social dos mais velhos em sociedades tradicionais. O que são sociedades tradicionais que ele está falando, hein, gente? Que tipo de sociedades são essas? Traditional societies. O que ele está falando, hein? Alguém me dá um exemplo aí de uma traditional society que ele está falando? Tribos. Boa, João, é isso mesmo. Está falando de pessoas que viviam em tribo, uma etapa anterior da civilização. Antigamente, a grande maioria, ou a maior parte da história, é de pessoas vivendo em tribos. Então, ele fala assim, olha, talvez a gente devesse interpretar aquelas vivências como sendo parte de um grande laboratório, né? Que a gente pode investigar. A gente tem história, a gente tem antropologia, a gente tem uma série de ciências baseadas em estudar as coisas do passado. All right, so what you guys can highlight, like what is the big message that this guy has? Qual que vocês acham que é a grande mensagem que ele está trazendo? Para vocês. Eu tenho para mim qual que é a grande mensagem que ele trouxe. Obrigado, João. É isso mesmo. A terceira idade tem mais valor do que pensamos. Pode falar, Susan, por favor.
O vídeo me fez lembrar de um filme, que é O Estagiário, que é justamente na qual as empresas começam a adquirir a cultura de pegar os estagiários mais velhos, no caso, geralmente, o pessoal que já se aposentou e quer movimentar a vida. Tanto que, na empresa, eles começam a ter uma visão diferente, na qual esse senhor ele começa a ter uma visão mais sensível, com respeito à organização, à segurança da própria chefe, digamos assim, então começa a alterar coisas simples que faz uma grande diferença no final.
Excelente, boa lembrança. Eu vi esse filme também e eu gostei. É uma historinha bonita de mostrando como que pessoas, né, de uma idade mais avançada pode trazer grandes vantagens para uma organização, né? Eu acho que esse é um ponto central da fala dele também. Quem mais gostaria de contribuir, gente? Tem uma coisa que me incomoda, sabe, Susan e João? Vocês comentaram aqui, eu vou comentar com vocês. Me incomoda um pouco o fato de que esse senhor que aparece ali, ele parece ser um exemplo muito especial de uma pessoa idosa. Ele tem uma organização de raciocínio, uma clareza de raciocínio, uma habilidade, eloquência, ele consegue transmitir as ideias dele com uma clareza inacreditável. Você vê como que ele lê e vai olhando para o público enquanto vai passando as páginas, ele começa a ler, memoriza e fala o resto da frase. Ele tem uma agilidade mental que é realmente extraordinária, não é comum, né? Uma pessoa idosa ter esse mesmo grau de habilidade. Então, assim, de uma certa forma, alguém a gente pode olhar para isso e falar assim, mas espera aí, esse cara é um idoso, mas é um gênio idoso, né? É um cara completamente atípico nas suas habilidades e tal. Mas não é disso que ele está falando. Não é de ser realmente uma pessoa extraordinária, como provavelmente ele é. Ele está falando que qualquer idoso tem algumas vantagens em relação a outras pessoas. Tem uma maior habilidade em lidar com relações humanas, tem uma maior tranquilidade para lidar com conflitos, sem deixar o próprio ego, né, o ego pessoal da pessoa, se interpor à solução de algum conflito. There is one aspect that he mentions that I think it's very present in Brazil. I don't know about you guys, but I see those a lot in my family, my wife's family. It is very common for us to have grandparents taking care of the kids. Não é muito comum no Brasil isso, gente? Os vovôs e vovós cuidarem das crianças para os pais? I mean, that is not as common in the US as it is in Brazil. So this is a sharp difference between Brazilian society and American society. And the guy comes for an explanation for that. Ó, o João está comentando aqui que passou boa parte da vida dele sendo atendido ali pelos avós. Muita gente que passou por isso. Eu também me lembro de, em muitas circunstâncias, eu estar na casa dos meus avós. Aliás, olha só, gente, eu tenho 51 anos de vida. Eu sonho até hoje com a casa dos meus avós. Eu sei, se eu fechar o olho aqui, ó, eu consigo andar direitinho na casa dos meus avós, cada detalhe da casa, onde está cada coisa. Eu sei onde eu vou buscar um biscoito, onde que está, que tipo de... Como é que eu vou buscar água na geladeira, eu sei a cor das paredes, eu sei, é impressionante como é marcante na vida nossa essa relação com os nossos avós. Isso não é tão comum nos Estados Unidos. Por quê? Quem se lembra? Quem pegou esse elemento aí da palestra? Why is that it is not common for American families to have grandparents around? You guys remember that detail that he discusses? You can't remember, right? Okay, I'll tell you. It's because people move a lot. He tells us that the average American will move from one city to another on average every 5 years. So in your adult life, you will probably change addresses, cities, like 5, maybe 6 times. So it's harder to be around when you are living so far, right? In different states or something like this. Então, a mobilidade geográfica da família americana muitas vezes acaba impedindo esses laços de familiares, né? Now, I'll tell you a secret, okay? Don't share it with anyone, but one of the reasons I came back from the US when I finished my studies there was because I didn't want my children to be familyless. Uma das razões porque eu decidi voltar para o Brasil depois que eu terminei de estudar lá no exterior é porque eu não queria que minhas filhas fossem, né, sem família. Que eles não tiverem aquelas. Eu queria que minhas filhas tivessem primo, prima, avô, avó, tio, igual eu tive. Imagina se eu tivesse escolhido morar num país estrangeiro, uma vez por ano, quando muito, eu ia ter a visita dos avós. Não tem como elas desenvolverem relação, amizade, carinho por primo, por prima, por tio. So this is one of the reasons we decided to come back, and it actually made a huge difference in our decision, right? We actually thought about this and said, you know what? It's not fair to them. You know, we would be like outcasting them. A gente estaria isolando nossas filhas da família. Go ahead, Caio. Let me hear.
Professor, é engraçado se eu falar isso porque boa parte da minha vida eu morei fora, né? Então eu só fiz nascer aqui em Recife e com 2 meses meus pais se mudaram de país. E, na verdade, meu pai já estava no outro país fazendo, enfim, o estudo dele, o pós-doutorado dele. Então eu tive muito pouco contato com minha família, né?
Uhum.
Depois voltamos e a gente foi passar 10 anos em Roraima, onde também a gente não tinha familiares, depois voltou e foi passar um tempo na Holanda. Então, assim, isso eu vejo o impacto disso na minha vida, nas próprias relações que eu tenho com os meus familiares hoje, entendeu? E eu perdi muito esse contato com a família, né? Então, para mim, óbvio, eu tenho carinho acho que só minha avó é viva ainda, uma delas. Eu tenho um carinho com eles, mas eu não tenho uma relação próxima, assim, um amor profundo que as outras pessoas nutrem, entendeu? E pelo outro lado também, eu tenho muito mais apego à minha família nuclear, né? Porque eu acho que foi a constância que me manteve ao longo da minha vida, né? Com todas as mudanças, foi a quem eu me apeguei mais. Então é interessante se eu mencionar isso, que é bem o meu caso mesmo.
Legal, muito legal o seu testemunho. O Lucas também está comentando aqui, ó. Humans are social beings. We need to keep in touch with our family. If we don't keep in touch with others, we get sick. You are right about that, Lucas. You know, when people, one of the reasons people can be healthy as older, I mean, it's like a very strong determinant of how healthy you are when you are 80 years old, is the number of friends you have. Can you believe that? I mean, you are much more likely to develop depression if you don't have old friends around. You're much more likely to die of a heart disease if you don't have, I don't know, a good relationship with your brothers and sisters. É impressionante como a saúde das pessoas está diretamente ligada à força dos seus laços. Não é pelo número de relações, é claro, né? Se o cara tem 10 amigos, ele está mais saudável do que o que tem 5 amigos. Não é isso. Mas é pela durabilidade dessas relações, o conforto emocional que essas relações dão, sim, elas fazem uma profunda diferença na saúde das pessoas. It is true, Lucas, nowadays, when you are young, and it gets even more stronger as a factor when we get older. So we have to watch out for this, okay? I mean, it's like a game plan. We all have lives. Sometimes we get apart from some of our friends or some of our relatives. Kyle was mentioning exactly that, right? Sometimes we have to move. We are going to be away for some time. But we should kind of nurture those longer friendships, right? Raise your hand if you have like a friend that you know for more than 15 years. Levanta sua mão aí se você tem algum amigo que você tem contato com ele há mais de 15 anos. Caio tem, claro, excluindo pai, mãe, irmão, né? Caio, Rayane. Come on, guys, what about you? Susan also. Aimee also has friends. Eric just got in. I don't know if you listen to us. So yeah, I mean, I have some friends from college. And notice, I'm talking about more than 30 years back. Tem 30 anos que eu saí da faculdade, que eu era estudante de economia lá na UFMG. Eu tenho amigos daquela época. Pelo menos sobraram 2, assim, de todos os meus colegas de faculdade. Oh, sorry, Eric, no problem. I was just making this comment about how important having longer relationships may be for the health of people, you know, especially when they get older. So the topic of tonight is about ageism, which is like the prejudice against older people. And we started watching this video, and this guy was talking about traditional societies. All right, guys, so let's wrap this thing up with this idea, okay? What is the main message in this talk? qual foi a grande mensagem que esse cara tentou trazer para a gente sobre sociedades modernas? O que ele recomenda que a gente preste um pouquinho mais atenção? O que ele acha que pode ser um bom caminho para as sociedades modernas lidarem melhor com os seus velhos e velhas? Okay, I don't know about you, but what I think is this. The big message is usefulness. A gente tem que dar utilidade, envolver as pessoas, mesmo elas estando mais velhas e dependendo mais da gente, a gente precisa depender delas também. A gente precisa dar tarefas, contar com elas para as coisas, e porque se a gente tirar isso delas, elas perdem o senso de valor. Não só a gente passa a tratá-las como sem valor, como elas mesmas perdem o seu senso de valor. Elas falam, não sirvo para mais nada. Antes todo mundo me pedia ajuda, agora eu estou aqui isolado, isolada. So I think the big message is this. These people, they are capable, they can help a lot, and it is up to us to decide how much we trust them, how much we count on them. Isso mesmo, Susan. Essa sociedade de idosos é a nova sociedade. Now, obviously, most of you here are economists, as I am, and you guys also know that older people do spend lots and lots of money, right? So there is a thing called the gray economy. Have you guys heard this expression? The gray economy? Economia cinza ou economia grisalha, talvez fosse melhor a tradução. All right, so you have businesses that develop products for older people. And apparently their public is always growing, you know? O público, o cliente delas não para de crescer. Então, cada vez mais pessoas dependendo de serviços. Então, as pessoas que fazem fisioterapia para idosos, as pessoas que prestam serviço de cuidados, né, cuidados domésticos, às vezes, cuidadores, cuidadoras. Não tem desemprego para esse pessoal, não. Algumas vezes o trabalho não é fácil, né? Não vamos nos iludir. Um trabalho de um cuidador, tem que levar uma pessoa para ir no banheiro, limpar aquela pessoa, ter paciência com a pessoa quando ela está nervosa e tal. Não é fácil. Eu já tive essa experiência, eu sei que não é fácil. Não profissionalmente, claro, mas para um parente. E é difícil, mas não existe desemprego nesse setor, não. Tem gente largando carreira de enfermeiro para ser cuidador. Porque é uma demanda muito crescente, muito grande. All right, so the main message here is this. We have better ways to deal with this problem, okay? We can involve older people, and as much as we trust them and we count on them, they will take longer to lose their abilities, to lose their usefulnesses, or something like that. Elas vão ficar mais úteis, elas vão demorar mais tempo a perder as habilidades se a gente de fato contar com elas, se a gente confiar nelas, atribuir tarefas e esperar contar com elas para fazer. Se a gente achar prematuramente que aquelas pessoas não têm valor, a gente acaba as condenando a perder o valor e perder suas habilidades. All right. At least for me, this is the most important message. Anyone would like to add something? Alguém gostaria de adicionar algum aspecto para minha interpretação? No? All right, then, so let's get back here to the class notes. We are going to leave the other video for Friday, okay? So what we want to remember here is that this guy, Jared Diamond, let me get the pen here. Okay, so here it is his name, Jared Diamond. And this guy makes those points. What age means in modern society, it is no more knowledge, wisdom. It is no more usefulness. What it is like dependence, weakness. They are called a burden. Their knowledge is mostly considered obsolete. And he tries to argue that the experience they have and the social skills that they have are not only different from ours, but they are complementary, right? So we should not waste those wealth, those sorts of sources of wealth, okay? All right, very good. So let's keep going. Now, take a look at this picture for a minute. What we have here is the average life expectancy of countries from all over the world. Now, obviously, you can see that Japan is over there at the top. So in Japan, it's very common for people to live over 80 years. The same thing with South Korea and with United Kingdom. When you take the world average, it's a little bit slower, a little bit lower. And the same thing happens with countries like India, Ethiopia, and South Africa. But you have to pay attention to the big picture. All of them are going up, all right? So you may be at different points here. South Africa is closer to 65 years old, and Japan is closer to 85 years old. But all of these societies are living way, way longer. So this is a global phenomenon, regardless of who is at the front, okay? Now, you probably guys have heard or seen this picture before. This is an age pyramid. Now, let me explain to you. Each of those sides express either male or female, okay? The left-hand side here is male, and the right-hand side is female. Now, this triangle here that I'm highlighting, it means that in the 50s, we had lots and lots of kids and younger people, and very few people with ages above 70 years old. Now, when we move to 2010, you see that the picture is changing. So the triangle is getting flatter, it's getting fatter or something like this. And when we talk about 2050, you already know that there is like a very large of society that is up here. Sometimes 25, maybe 30% of older people. So according to this magazine, The Economist, by 2100, 22.3% of people will be 65 years old or older. And that coming from 7.6 in 2010. So in 90 years, we have this huge jump on the participation of older people, right? So yeah, this is almost like an inevitable phenomenon. It is coming, and it's very, very, very much predictable. Those projections, if anything, they can only be accelerated. Now, you guys, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but when I was at your age, I usually heard that in China, people were forbidden to have more than one kid. Uma boa parte da minha vida, eu convivi com a notícia de que na China era proibido ter mais de um filho. Se você tivesse mais que um filho, aquilo causava uma demanda de uma população que crescia rápido demais e que não era capaz de gerar alimento para todo mundo. Não era proibido. A grande maioria da minha vida eu vi essa história. Now check this out. This is from 2021, which means 2 years ago. China moves to 3-child policy to boost falling birth rates. Now, what's happening in China now is they're trying to stimulate people to have more kids. They give money. The government will pay for people to have more kids because the velocity of this change in population is so high that the bureaucrats are all scared on how they're going to manage such an older society so fast. You see? That's a radical change. It's like a 180 degrees change. In Brazil, same thing. We have like a growing population of older people, and that will bring us some challenges. Now, I wanted to talk about this document that was prepared by United Nations, but this is like mostly a very, very interesting diagram, okay? So the document I'm talking about is this one here. It's called Golden Aging: Prospects for a Healthy, Active, and Prosperous Aging in Europe and Central Asia. Let me translate this for you, okay? Envelhecimento dourado. As perspectivas para um envelhecimento saudável, ativo e próspero na Europa e na Ásia Central. All right, so it is like a strange diagram, so I'm going to try and help you guys and read this diagram with you, okay? Now, let's start with the basics, okay? Here we have this arrow. On the right-hand side, we're talking about good events, opportunities. On the left-hand side, we're talking about challenges, okay? Então, para o lado direito desse diagrama, essas duas bolotas aqui estão falando de coisas que são boas, que são oportunidades. Essas duas outras bolotas aqui são preocupações, coisas que são desafios, tá? So let me clean this for a little bit. Okay, right. So this is left hand or right hand side. Now, if you're talking about up here, we're talking about things related to demography, the changing of number, size, and age of a population. On the lower part here, we are talking about economics. So we're going to talk about economic factors somehow creating or stimulating or participating either in a problem or in a solution, okay? So up there, we are talking about things that come from demography. And down here, we are talking about things that are mostly related to economics. Okay. All right. So now we are almost there, so we can read the diagram correctly. There is this final piece of information. Check out the colors here, guys. Okay? Here we are seeing that the blue colors means somehow we are dealing with the impact of inequality. Okay? So we have to look for that, and mostly inequality is a bad thing. Most of the consequences of inequality are complicated, are challenges, okay? Now, the second part here is green, which means what kind of behaviors we could promote, what kind of behavioral changes it would be, I don't know, desirable, they would be preferable, okay? So we're talking about comportamento, que tipo de resposta, mudança de comportamento que seriam apropriadas naquele contexto. And finally, when you have the yellow color here, we are talking about policy priorities, things that the government should pay attention and should watch out, okay? All right, so now we have all the elements to interpret this diagram. So let's start with this one. Okay, so we are talking about demography and a challenge. Então, um desafio proveniente das tendências demográficas. Qual que é essa tendência demográfica? Está escrito aqui no meio, ó. Baixa fertilidade. Low fertility. Okay, so why is this a problem and what should we do about it? Well, people don't have as many kids as they did before. Now, just to give you an example, in my family, my father was the older guy out of 9 kids. Meu pai era o filho mais velho de uma família de 9 pessoas. In my personal experience, I was the second son out of 4 kids. Então, na minha família, lá no meu núcleo familiar, eu era o segundo filho de 4. Meu pai era o primeiro filho de 9, eu era o segundo de 4. And I have 2 kids, 2 daughters. So, in 2 generations, the family moved down from 11 members, my grandparents and 9 kids, to 6, my parents and my brothers and sisters, to 4, myself, my wife, and my 2 daughters. So 11, 6, 4. So families are shrinking, right? So what's going on here? Well, first we understand that the desired family size should be on the rise, right? I mean, we could try and promote larger families. We don't want that. Most of the people are avoiding having kids. So at some point, we as a society, we somehow have to value them. Just like China is doing. You know, China is trying to promote larger families by supporting them with some kind of financial help, all right? Obviously, we know that there is very large, sharp differences in the size of households depending on how wealthy you are, right? So, yes, this thing is deeply, strongly impacted by wealth and wealth inequality. And what can we do about this thing? Well, we have to make some labor market reforms, guys. So, what are we talking about here? O que seria uma reforma do mercado de trabalho que ajudaria a gente a lidar com esse problema de as famílias estarem ficando cada vez menores? What do you guys say? Que tipo de reformas no mercado de trabalho poderiam ajudar a lidar com o problema de as pessoas estarem parando de ter filhos? Aumentar a licença maternidade? That's a very good point, Caio. You know that in Brazil, we have a 6-month maternity leave, right? In the US, it is 45 days. Can you believe that? 45 days. And what is even more astonishing, I don't know, scary, is the fact that in the US, most of the women, they return from maternity leave before 45 days. They are afraid they will lose their jobs and they just quit being mothers full time to go back to their jobs with less than 45 days. Can you believe this? Não sei se vocês entenderam, pessoal. Aqui no Brasil, licença maternidade é de 6 meses. Nos Estados Unidos é 45 dias. Mas o que mais me impressionou lá é que a maioria das mulheres volta antes ao trabalho, porque elas têm medo de perder o emprego. com menos de 45 dias, elas colocam os filhos recém-nascidos na mão de um cuidador, de uma cuidadora, de um parente, para voltar a trabalhar. As crianças ainda estão amamentando. Go ahead, Susan. Let me hear from you.
É outra coisa também que tem um certo preconceito nas empresas, principalmente quando é mulher, e está na faixa etária, digamos assim, da idade reprodutiva, que pode gerar filhos. Então, tem empresas que ficam receosas em contratar mulheres. E, além disso, tem aquele processo: você tem filho, sim ou não? Então, eles começam a colocar, digamos assim, empecilhos para que você não consiga a vaga. E, geralmente, dão para a pessoa que não tem filho e, entre aspas, seja mais nova.
Pronto, agora me ajuda aqui. Que tipo de política pública que a gente podia colocar para acabar com esse preconceito? Por favor, não diga fazer uma fiscalização, vigiar, obrigar as empresas a contratar, porque não vai funcionar. Pensa numa política pública que você podia falar assim: a empresa agora não se importa de você ser mulher e estar em idade entre 25 e 35 anos. Que tipo de política pública você poderia fazer para evitar esse preconceito e essa discriminação? Anyone can think about anything, any sort of intervention as a public policy that could help? Vamos lá, gente, sejam criativos.
Eu pensei, por exemplo, dependendo do cargo que a pessoa exerça, claro, né?
Uhum.
Ter a flexibilização, que as mulheres poderem trabalhar em casa para tentar equilibrar. Ou até mesmo houvesse alguém na empresa para dar um suporte, digamos assim, para que a mulher conseguisse trabalhar de modo ativo sem sair de casa e ter que deixar a criança, por exemplo, com o cuidador e etc.
Ótimo. Essa é uma ótima ideia. Falar assim, está totalmente autorizado o trabalho remoto de gestantes e mulheres que acabaram de ter filhos. No período de maternidade, está totalmente autorizada você fazer algum tipo de pagamento por serviços. Claro, não ia dar para ser 8 horas por dia. Ó, o Caio colocou aqui, introdução de espaços família. Deixa eu ver aqui, tem mais um outro comentário. Introdução de espaços família ou daycare em empresas grandes. Tudo bem, Caio, mas olha, aí é mais custo a empresa. Você não vai estimular a empresa, ela vai querer falar assim, pô, se eu não tiver nenhum empregado com idade gestante, eu não preciso ter o family ou daycare nas próprias empresas. O João Romeu colocou assim, blind interview, fazer entrevista de maneira às cegas, né? Sem a pessoa saber o gênero e a idade da outra pessoa. Eu também acho que tá difícil, viu, João? Eu acho que não ia funcionar, não. Eu vou dar o meu pitaco aqui, tá? Bolsa gestante. Bolsa gestante ia ser um dinheiro que a empresa recebe com o valor da despesa que ele tem com a pessoa em licença maternidade, e a empresa usa aquele dinheiro para contratar quem ela quiser. Você fala assim, ó, sua funcionária saiu de licença maternidade, a gente paga o valor que você vai usar para ter a substituta, um trabalho temporário de alguém que vai ficar no lugar dela. All right, if that was the case, notice what's happening, guys. I mean, I don't know if that's the perfect solution, but think about this for a while. If you are using public money to support the company that will have an employee leaving for maternity, what you're saying is this: who pays for motherhood? Society, not the company. If you had such a policy, you would say society will take responsibility for paying this service that we all need. We are born from mothers, right? We need them. It's the most fundamental service that civilization provides. Então, você poderia fazer, não, esse é um trabalho social. A pessoa ser mãe, ela não só tem os interesses pessoais, ela está fazendo um trabalho social. Se ela não quiser ser mãe, a sociedade se lasca. Então, tem uma externalidade positiva gigante na maternidade. As crianças saudáveis, crianças inteligentes, com cérebro bem desenvolvido. Isso é um benefício gigante para a sociedade. A mãe que sofre o custo. Quando a gente tenta empurrar para a empresa não aceita. É isso que a Susan está falando. A empresa vai lá e tem preconceito. Fala, não posso, porque se eu te contratar... Aí arruma alguma desculpa, fala, não, ó, achei você muito agressiva na entrevista. Como? Não briguei com ninguém e tal. Alright, so, in my opinion, you would have to use public money to pay for this public service. It is a public service. And the way you should do it is like avoiding that the cost for this public service ends up with the company. So society has to pay. Isn't it a social benefit? So yes, society in general should pay for it. What do you think, guys? You like my proposition? Levanta a mão aí se você gostou da minha ideia. Okay, Lucas did like. Who else? How many of you did I convince? Erica, Yuri. Yeah, someone has to bear the burden of this cost. Yes. And it is a public service. We have to recognize that, right? Now, if we had such a thing, can you believe how different women would be analyzed as an asset for a company? Você consegue imaginar que uma grande parte da discriminação da mulher ia desaparecer se você tivesse isso? Uma parte enorme da discriminação da mulher no mercado de trabalho é decorrente exatamente desse ponto. Você ia eliminar talvez uma das maiores fontes de preconceito e discriminação contra a mulher. Alright, so this is what we mean by labor market reforms. We have to change the rules of the labor market so that we avoid dumping those costs on the companies. Because otherwise they will just, try to avoid them. That's obviously, right? Okay, we are almost done with our time here. Let me just have a look at one more of these circles, okay? And we will stop in a couple of minutes. So take a look at this one here on the lower side here, fiscal pressure. So we are talking about an economic factor, and we are talking about something that is hard, that is a challenge, that is a problem, okay? So what it is fiscal pressure? Well, the government has to spend more as the society gets older. Now, is that true? Let's think about this. Well, first, we know that income inequality rises with age. Se a gente pegar a diferença, a desigualdade de renda, ela é mais aguda na velhice. Tem uma proporção menor de pessoas ricas na velhice do que você tem de pessoas ricas ou, enfim, capazes de sustentar na idade média, na idade adulta e tal. Alright, so this is the inequality aspect of it. What could be behavioral responses related to that? We could have higher labor participation and saving rates. So, what does that mean? As pessoas deveriam trabalhar até um pouco mais tarde, de modo que a gente não tenha tantas pessoas idosas fora do mercado de trabalho, mas as pessoas também deveriam aumentar as suas poupanças, as suas reservas, a sua aposentadoria. Mesmo quem tem um plano de aposentadoria deveria ter também uma poupança. We spend a lot when we get older. We have to think about that ahead of time. And what can we have as a policy priority? Guys, look at this. This is a huge point. in Brazil, we had this huge discussion about pensions reforms, and people were attributing all sorts of bad intentions to the proponents of those reforms. Os caras estavam atacando, todo mundo que falava que defendia reforma previdenciária era atacado como sendo neoliberal, como sendo desumano, tirando o direito dos velhinhos e tudo mais. This thing is happening all over the world. We don't have enough people to pay for all the older people. I don't know, people getting retired at 55 years old. In Brazil, we have people getting retired at 55, 57 years old. We just don't have enough money to pay such a larger share of the population as retired people. So we have to postpone retirement. It's inevitable. It's happening in China, in Russia, in the US, in Brazil, in Bolivia, any place in the world. The other day, France was in chaos just because they were trying to raise the age of retirement from 65 to 67 years old in France. And people were just, setting fire in cars at the streets because they were so absolutely angry about pension reforms. And it is like inevitable. We have to understand this. Society is getting older. We just don't have enough people paying for such a larger share of society. So people will have to work till longer. They have to postpone retirement. Now, how we do that? Well, we have to take care of their health, right? We're going to have to deal with that because we can't have like sick people coming to the job market. That won't do, right? All right, guys. So you guys can tell that I love this diagram, right? I hope you guys take a look at it, and we are going to come back to those later on, okay? My time is almost up. I'm going to stop this presentation here, and I'm going to thank you all. Stop recording, and I'm going to be here for a few more minutes if you want to talk to me. Otherwise, have this great night, okay?